Hi, everyone. Welcome to the replay of today's session on August the 31st, where we continued last session talking about automating customer follow-ups. If you missed last session, the link is in the description. Now, as a quick summary for today's session, we talked about 4 topics. Timestamps are in the description. Number 1, a voicemail reminder script template that you can use or customize for your own voicemail reminders to customers. Second, if you aren't comfortable recording your own voice, there are 2 online services that can generate voices based on a script that you have. One is even free. By the way, I have no affiliation with either of those services. Third, we talked about the top 5 things customers expect when they onboard based on research from PwC. And finally, we talked about one of the cornerstones of customer onboarding, the intake form, specifically how to make it easy for you and your customers. So let's get started. Let's start with tips and recommendations. And based on what we covered last session, we were talking about automated customer follow-ups, emails, text, and voicemails. So now as a tip, I have a voicemail script template that you can use for your recorded voicemails. Now we ran out of time last session, so I'm going to show it to you now. And here is the script template. As you can see, it's pretty short, which is exactly what you want for the email. So if we go through this, you can see, you can say something like, "Hi, this is John from Polaris Financial. This is a recorded reminder that we're still waiting for your response for tax returns. We cannot move forward without it. You should have also received an email reminder from us earlier today or a text message about this. Just click on the link in your email or text message to send us your response. Or feel free to call our office at whatever the office number is. Again, this is John from Polaris Financial, and we appreciate your attention on the matter. Thank you." And as you can see, it's very short voicemail. It reads under about 30 seconds, and it transcribes, as I mentioned in the last session, it transcribes very nicely in your phone. Now, I'm going to go ahead and send a copy of the script with the replay after this session. And once you have this recorded, as a reminder, from last session, here's where you can upload it. So on the auto reminder screens, you can click on the upload button, and this button will give you the ability to either record your voicemail directly or upload the voicemail that you just recorded on your phone or in your webcam or something like that. Now, if you don't have time to do a voice recording, you can use a computer generated audio for your voicemails. And here are 2 text to audio sites that can actually generate voiceovers for you based on your script. Now, I don't have any affiliation with these sites. It's just the best ones that I found for text to speech. The first one is Wideo with a W. It's a good free option, but you are limited to 2,000 characters per day, which is more than enough for your voicemail. Now, I tested all the voices in Wideo, and the best male voice is Trey, and the best female voice is Ellie. They sound the most natural, but it's still, as you can imagine from a free option, they are still a little bit robotic. Now, the other one, Play.ht, has very, very good voices, very natural voices, but it is paid. The site is meant for video creators, podcasters, things like that. So the voice quality is very good. So if you want that extra high quality voice, I would recommend paying for Play.ht. Now you could purchase just 1 month on the professional plan, which is just $40, and it's not too bad. Their best male voice is Guy. It's a premium voice, which you need the professional plan for. And the best female voice is Jenny. Again, premium voice, you need the professional plan for. Excellent voices. And since you paid for a month, I would definitely recommend pairing those voices with images and PowerPoint slides to create any additional training videos or walkthrough videos for your customers, because just take advantage of the fact that you paid for an entire month. All right, if there are no questions, then let's go ahead and move to the second part of our agenda. Now, since we were talking about onboarding, one of the biggest things that we talked about is why do we need to constantly follow up with customers during the onboarding phase? And actually, if you look at the research from PwC, who did research on this, according to the research, they notated the key things that customers expect from service providers. And as you can see at the very top, speed and efficiency is number one. It is the most important things that customers want from their service providers. Now, human interaction, which surprisingly is much lower. It is down here, kind of the middle of the pack. It is important still, but it is not the most important thing that customers want. And in fact, if you zero in on the top five, you can see here the top five, according to PwC research, is customers want speed and efficiency, convenience, number two, friendly and knowledgeable service, number 3 and 4, and easy payment, number 5. And those are the top 5 things that your customer care about the most. And if you think about it, those are probably your top 5 too that you expect from your vendors. So what does that mean, and how does that apply to customer onboarding given the fact that these are the top 5 from your customers? Well, here is a list of the common tasks that you and your customer has to get through when you first onboard them. And it's a lot. You can see there's a lot of things on this particular list. And as you can imagine, every little hiccup creates massive friction for your customer. And so this is why it takes so long, or this is why it feels like you're pushing a rock up the hill when you're trying to onboard customers and trying to get them to finish their to-dos. So how do we then make it fast, easy, convenient? Well, in the previous sessions, we talked about several of these items. Previously, we talked about e-sign, because e-sign really makes things easy and fast for the customer, as opposed to having somebody download a PDF, physically sign it, take a picture, or scan it and send it to you. Just think about that. The e-sign makes it so much easier for a customer to take action. And that is why having e-sign makes customer onboarding much, much easier. Now, after the e-sign in pipeline, we immediately redirect the user to start their onboarding. And think about it, the reason why we do that is because then customers don't have to wait for the kickoff meeting to actually get started during the onboarding. So that's another friction point that you eliminate, because the customer doesn't have to wait. They can get started immediately. Now, after that, we talked about welcoming customers with a short onboarding video. You have the template for that. And that's because it's super easy, quick, and people will actually watch a video as opposed to reading a long, wordy welcome letter. So the key information that you're trying to relay becomes much more accessible when you put it into video form, as opposed to, giving them, 2-3 pages in a welcome letter. So after all of that, so today let's talk about the intake form, right? Collect the actual collection of the information from your customer. So let me go ahead and jump into pipeline here. And here is an example of a intake form from CPA charge, right? A fairly standard generic CPA intake form that they recommend for you. And you can see here, starting from the very beginning, it is quite lengthy, quite detailed, and it can be, there's a lot of fields for someone to fill out. So you can see here all of these fields that someone has to download this, fill it out, and then send it to you, scan it or something like that. So, again, you can see the signature lines and so on. So if you think about it in terms of what PwC said, this is not very fast or easy or convenient for the customer to do. I mean, this is something that they're going to have to take the time to do. And so if they take the time to do it, they could either forget about it, or take a long time to complete this, which means that you're going to have to push the customer to complete their task. So this is the opposite of what we want. We want something that's fast, easy, and convenient for the customers to be able to do. So as an example, this is in pipeline what we do here. So here's a similar intake form. Again, we're redirecting the customer to this particular page immediately after the e-sign. So a customer comes here, they watch the welcoming video, and in the welcome video, you obviously redirect them to say, please fill out the intake form right below. And so immediately they can get started underneath. And what's great about a digital form like this is that many browsers and even your phone on your mobile device, they can pre-fill a lot of this information. Now in Pipeline, we created many of these fields into a pre-created set that we called form field templates that you can leverage. So we pre-created all of these for you. And what's nice about having them pre-created is because we also make sure that the data that you collect from the customer is going to be formatted correctly so that you don't have typos or data entry errors. So for example, the social security number, you can see, we make sure that we pre-format it. It's not going to be the wrong length. Now, if you think about a PDF that I showed you from CPA Charge, somebody could mistype, somebody could put in incorrectly the wrong format, all of these things, which causes you problems later on. Same thing for like a date of birth. This is a date picker. And you can see here, because, listening to our customers, when they ask for date of birth, you can see here that we don't allow somebody to put in a future date. So you can't put in a date in the future. You can only put in dates in the past. Again, it eliminates a lot of these data entry errors. So we definitely recommend when you're using an intake form to leverage the form field templates that we have pre-created for you, because we took all of these little factors into account. The other thing I can show you here is for address. A big thing that causes data entry errors is address. It's so important in so many of our intake forms, but the address is one of the key areas where mistakes can happen. And in our form field templates, we make sure that we tie into Google Maps so that we're always going to get an accurate address, the city, the state, and the zip code. That way, you're not going to have these typo or fat finger errors when it is just a generic blank text box. Now, the other thing that we did here in a best practice from a form perspective is that you want to make sure that you have conditional fields. So here's an example, a conditional field for a spouse. If you remember in the CPA charge one, they listed out every single form field and you have to put them all in, and then they put a title that says if applicable or something like that. Having a long form intake form can overwhelm a customer, and that's again causes friction. So when you have something short like this, if they don't have a spouse, they say no, they move forward. If they do have a spouse, you can see the conditional fields pop up and all of those fields become required, as you can see here, for spouse, SSN, spouse, date of birth, and so on. Again, we've taken all of these things into account when creating our form field templates, so that way we minimize a lot of these intake errors from data entry. Now, the same thing that you can see here for do you own a business? I'm going to go ahead and say yes, I own a business. And all of these business fields that are very, very commonly asked are set up here. From company name to taxpayer ID, the entity type, all of these things are being asked here. Again, we've taken all of these into account, so we want to make sure that you leverage them in your intake form. Now, one thing that you see here that we can show you here is I didn't ask about dependents. And asking about dependents is actually pretty simple. So let me actually go to the flow here and expand number 1. And this is my intake form. And we actually have, I'm going to put it right underneath spouse. And so we actually have created for you a form field template for dependents. So you can see here, I'm just going to do a quick search. I'm going to look for dependents, and this is what I'm looking for. Dependents 0 or 10. We get in our form field template, we allow up to 10. So we ask the question, do you have dependents? As you can see, again, this is a conditional field. And if they say yes, then they can select how many dependents they have. And we ask for all of this dependent information. So let me go ahead and just add that to our intake form. As you can see, all of these fields are pre-created for you. It makes it super, super easy to add these fields into your intake form without you having to create all of these fields from scratch. So let's go back to our intake form here. I'm going to go and do a refresh. And you can see here down below, we now have the question for, do you have dependents? And if I say yes, it asks, how many dependents do I have? And so you can see here, I can put in the name, social security number, date of birth, and the relationship. So this makes collecting the data from your customer intake very, very easy, both for you, because we minimize a lot of these data errors, and for your customer as well, because all of this information can be pre-filled and it minimizes errors for them. Now, the second thing that I want to show you here is, we notice, you notice a lot of times, for a lot of these fields, we don't allow people to freeform type. So for example, social security number and so on. And that actually is an industry best practice, to not, or try to avoid freeform text fields if at all possible. Because a lot of times the data that you need exists or needs to be fed in a very, very specific format into your CRM, into your tax software, into whatever program that needs this information. A lot of it has to be pre-formatted. So for example, date of birth, we don't want anybody to type in anything in here. This will give you the data in a very specific format. Same thing for example, state. You don't want people, again, you don't want people just typing in random things. Giving them an option both makes it easy and helps minimize data errors. Another example here is in a business, looking at entity type. Again, for a user who's filling this in, if I don't have to type and I can just press choose a drop down and then choose an option in the drop down, it makes it very easy for me to fill this in. And so having something like this, making sure that you're leveraging drop downs options for people as much as possible, makes your intake form easier to fill out. And so I would recommend going through your intake forms and looking at options where you're asking a yes or no question, or asking questions where you're asking for options that somebody can select, turning those into radio buttons like this, or drop downs, so that you minimize the amount of typing that someone has to do. So that's a best practice that we have. So again, looking at something like this, what tax year did you last file your income taxes? Super easy. I can have a drop down and I can just point and I can just click. And remember, some of your customers may be filling this stuff out on their phone. And again, if they get a welcome letter and your intake form is a PDF, they see it on their phone, immediately they're going to say, okay, I'll do it later, right? And we all know what that means when they say, I'll do it later. So if they get it on their phone, they see the welcome email, they click on pipeline, and they see a digital intake form where all they have to do is just click a few buttons and then fill everything out. That makes it super easy and more likely that they're going to actually complete the step when you have their attention. So this is what makes it super, super easy for you. Now, the last question that I want to tackle here is, well, how many questions is too much on an intake form? So you can see here that we have quite a bit of information here, right? It could seem like a lot of questions, but if you remember, a lot of these were hidden when you first started. So when a customer first comes to this particular page, this is all they see, right? This is all they see. It fits on one screen. And so it's very, very easy for someone to fill this out. It doesn't look intimidating, right? It doesn't look as intimidating as that 3-page intake form of a PDF that you saw. So as they're filling stuff out, questions will pop out like this, and it doesn't look as intimidating because everything else above it has already been filled. So as I'm going through filling out the rest of this information, right, it doesn't make the form feel intimidating to fill out. So as I'm going through and I say, oh, I have one dependent, let me go ahead and put in that information, and then I continue. Right. So having these conditional fields makes a long form less overwhelming because you can hide a lot of these fields. And so when we say how much is too much, the question for you is how many fields are you showing at the very beginning? Because that is what's key. And you want to limit the number of fields that you show at the beginning to, I would definitely say under 20 fields at the very beginning, and then hide the rest of the fields as conditional fields. So something like this, right? So this makes it very easy to someone to fill out, and the rest of the questions, if it doesn't apply, they would just choose no, and then they would move forward. All right, if there are no questions, then as a final reminder, thank you for joining us in today's session. Now, if you have any questions afterwards, you can definitely ping us in chat or review our online resource guide for frequently asked questions or FAQs, or open up a support case, or you can talk to an expert at any time. In the meantime, don't forget to join us in 2 weeks, Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, for our next session. All right, thanks everyone, and I'll see you there.